I want to welcome Laura Brotherson. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist. She is the author of the best-selling book, And They Were Not Ashamed, Strengthening Marriages Through Sexual Fulfillment, and her latest book, Knowing Her Intimately, 12 Keys for Creating a Sextraordinary Marriage. She counsels with individuals, couples, and families in private practice and online, and is the host of the Marital Intimacy Show podcast. Also a certified family life educator, Laura is actively engaged in providing marriage education through couples cruises, articles, newsletters, radio and television broadcasts, and presenting at conferences and workshops. Laura is passionate about helping couples navigate the intricacies of intimacy to help build stronger marriages and families. She and her husband, Kevin, of 25 years, are the founders of strengtheningmarriage.com, your trusted resource for education, products, and services to strengthen marriages intimately. To learn more, visit strengtheningmarriage.com. So, Laura, I want to welcome you. I'm so grateful that you were available to do this for us.
So welcome.
And as you know, we have been reading your book. We're doing the first 9 chapters this month, and then next month we're finishing up with the next 3. And the ladies have loved your book. So I'm super anxious to ask you some questions. Some of these questions have come in. Personal message from the ladies, being a little bit like, okay, do I dare ask this? So,
of course you do.
Anyway, we're going to ask. We're going to ask those questions that nobody wants or dares ask. We're going to shine some light on sexual intimacy today for sure. So first, I would love it if you wouldn't mind sharing with us the reason you chose to be a certified sex therapist and a little bit about your journey as a woman as you discovered your own issues with the good girl syndrome.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I had always known I wanted to be a marriage counselor. I got my bachelor's degree in family science. And so that was kind of always in the mix. When, so probably about 2002, when I was asked to teach a local community course on strengthening marriages, actually for the LDS Churches Institute program. That 12-week course ended up becoming my first book, And They Were Not Ashamed. And it was during that class where I think 3 or 4 of my classes ended up being directly about sexual intimacy, in addition to all the other, dimensions of marriage. And I knew by the time they asked me to teach it again, I was like, this needs to get out to a wider audience than just the couples I have here. So that kind of started, that got me into writing the first book. Even before I was, I had a graduate degree at that point. I only had my bachelor's at that point. And that pretty much sealed the deal that I was going to become a certified sex therapist. If any of your ladies have tried to look for them, they are very few and far between. And, even less findable for those that might be particularly religious or that are looking for a woman. And very few marriage counselors go on to get certified as a sex therapist, which is almost like having a second master's degree. There's that much training, that much supervision, that much additional work involved, and there's very few people that have gone that extra step. So that's the gist of that part. I guess the other question that you asked. So my journey too, I talk a lot about that in my first book, or a little bit more about that in my first book. But basically, we had a great marriage. I had learned a lot of stuff about sex as preparing to become a marriage counselor. But I really was the poster girl for the good girl syndrome. I mean, my dad laughed when he saw the first first manuscript of my first book. He's like, "Are you kidding me? You, of all people?" And he's like, "Laura, did you even kiss anyone in high school?" I'm like, "Yes, I did. Thank you." But he was shocked because that just, the good girl syndrome, I was it. And so a lot of a lot of women that kind of have the feeling that sex is kind of something, yes, and I had the understanding that it was a good thing, but thinking that, knowing that intellectually and knowing that internally are two very different things. And our society at large, and society religiously for a lot of Christian women, is just not very affirming of sexuality. And so, you know, even with a good marriage, in my case, there was just still so much missing. And that's the information I had found to teach the marriage class, and then to teach this, and then to write this first book, and so on and so on.
Well, and I think that's perfect. I think it's so valuable that you experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
So you are able to relate to women, you know, and I want to point out too, so my ladies know, that you do online counseling as well, which I think is fantastic. And
I just have a really long wait list right now, so I don't want to get your
okay. All right, long wait list, ladies. If you're interested, but I just think that's so great that you've brought it out to allow, you know, people from all over, and not just because you're in the Boise area. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's just not there. You just can't get enough help around. I mean, I counsel all over the place, so yeah, it's needed.
It is so needed, and maybe what we need is for you to be training other therapists to do what you do, and maybe you already do that.
I will.
Yeah, it is very, very needed. So my next question kind of consisted of, I loved on page 46, you talked about 3 considerations for women: that sex as a decision, the natural unfolding process, and then the focus on self. And I felt like these 3 small sections were so important for women to understand. Do you want to explain those a little bit in detail of those 3 things?
Yeah, you bet. That is funny, because you mentioning those 3 things, those are very big deals that I don't spend. I mean, you know, the first book is like a 400-page book. It's like, you know, I can only say so much. That's why I had to write another book. But that the first point that you brought up, I think was, let's see, sex is a decision.
Yes.
So in my new book, I go into that extensively, because basically sex is a decision is step 1 of what I call our female sexual response. Women are not walking around with desire in hand like men tend to be. So that sex is a decision. And I brought a couple of things that I use all the time with clients. So like, this is one of my handouts that I use all the time. And there's a box down here at the bottom that says step 0. And maybe I can give this to you and you can share it with your ladies.
Oh, yeah, I would love that.
But this step 0 is like a contextual, the relationship of the marriage is what makes us decide whether we're going to want to decide. Mm-hmm. And then step 1 right here is sex is a decision. So that's step 1 based on how is the relationship. And if you don't know that you've got to make a decision, if you're sitting around thinking, why am I never in the mood? Why am I broken? Mm-hmm. And your husband thinks you're broken too, of course, because you don't work right, according to him, kind of. And then, so you've got to know that sex is a decision. You're not going to feel sex. And that's what the other 4 steps are, is basically this step 0. But then these 4 steps are: sex is a decision. Now you need to talk me into it. Now you need to touch me into it. Now, step 4, I have some desire. So women are going to be partway into arousal, like I'm saying, in the 3, 4, 5 on a 10 scale, before they may actually experience desire itself.
Okay.
And people do not know that, particularly about women.
Yeah, I think that is so vital, because you're right. We do sit back and go, why am I not having this feeling? Why am I not having this uncontrollable urge that he talks about? What's wrong with me? How am I broken? So this just kind of validates we're made different. We are totally made different. That's something, that's kind of the basis of what I teach women, is we speak totally different languages, and it obviously includes sex as well.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
And Trina, my joke on this, because people give me, clients give me crap about this all the time. They're just like, why are women this way? And I just say, listen, God had to make somebody with a little bit of a brake system, because if we didn't, nobody would get anything else done but having sex all day. So, that was just his way of figuring that out.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and it is true because we do balance each other.
Mm-hmm.
And even in our different languages, our strengths balance his weaknesses. His strengths balance our weaknesses. Heavenly Father did not mess up.
Yeah.
He did not mess up.
Yeah,
he knew what he was doing. Okay, so the second one was the natural unfolding.
Yeah. So that one, so in my next book, all of these things are talked about in significant more detail, obviously, because I've worked with clients a lot more since then, so I've got a lot more context for those. The basic gist of the natural unfolding is that if you're going into sex with an objective, like we've got to have an orgasm this time, or we've got to not have premature ejaculation this time. When there is goal orientation to sex, it makes it really difficult for an orgasm to occur for women particularly, because an orgasm is an involuntary response. That means you have no control over it. It's going to happen because you are relaxed, because you are focused on sensing, you're focused on your spouse, you're just engaged, you're just present. And that mindfulness almost sexually, which women also don't know do real well, keeps us from usually getting to orgasm for those that struggle with that, is because we're focused too much on something instead of just relaxing into it.
Okay, I love that. In fact, I had one of my clients tell me that she had a therapist tell her one of the most important things a woman can do while getting in the mood and during that foreplay is to take deep breaths and breathe.
Yeah.
So and that goes right along with what you said. We need to relax.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about what the ultimate goal is.
Yeah.
I really like that. I like that. And then go ahead.
And related to that, Trina, is that a woman's number one challenge with sex is mental discipline. So think about that. If we are the World Wide Web,
yes,
and so everything is ever present before us at all times,
yes,
and so our husband's like, can you focus here? Can you focus? And we're not good at it because, and so one of the things that is one of my tools that I call arousal helpers which I talk about in my other book, is to focus on your breathing, particularly in the beginning stages of lovemaking, because it does help you to close all those mental windows in your mind, to focus in on being present, to focus in on your body, to focus in on sensing. And that's what helps you to move into this more natural unfolding. I have other steps as well that are kind of a little bit more demanding of your attention. And just one, for example, is being more active in touching him. That's kind of 2 steps up. But just as an example, instead of just kind of laying there like dead fish, like a dead fish, we're now kissing more and touching more and feeling more and rubbing your hands through his hair more, because it's demanding your attention. It's a mental discipline skill.
Yes. Oh, I see that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah, I like that. I'm so anxious to read your new book. Obviously we probably should have read it before, but
It's fine. It's fine.
Great content.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of good stuff, and we just finished the audio book, so that will be available Monday, probably.
Great.
And so people can listen while they're reading if they wanted to.
Well, and I bought the Audible for both the other book because I'm trying to get so much content in my head that I'm always listening to something, and so I have both. I've read it and listened to it. So
awesome.
All right.
Yeah, and the third one, so focus on self that you talked about. This is a really interesting one, but it kind of goes back to a little bit the World Wide Web concept. We already talked a little bit about that our brain is in so many different places that we do need to kind of focus on self. The second piece of that is women already tend to be more other-oriented and men tend to be more self-oriented. It's a gender characteristic. And so, if particularly, I just find it fascinating that that, certainly it's a great thing to be very other oriented and selfless, but in sex, that doesn't work real great for women.
Mm-hmm.
It works great for men, but pretty much most of the sexual teaching that we tend to get, particularly in, kind of religious circles, is almost opposite for what women should do. So everything we hear about to young men and young women, the women should almost do the opposite of.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And so the focus on self is really important, because you've got to be able to tune in, because again, we're the World Wide Web and we're 4 steps away from desire. So that puts us at an immediate disadvantage or difference with our spouse.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to be given permission to focus on self. It's about me. You need to focus on me. And this is why I often also say women really kind of need to be the first priority in sex.
Yeah.
And if orgasm is in the play there, it kind of should be her orgasm sort of is the first focus, because of all of these different things. So that's what I mean by that. And those are 3 really big points that don't talk about much in the first book.
Yeah. And I just want to say, when I read that and read the focus on self, how much I appreciated reading that, because I had told my husband, we've been married 26 years, and I had told him that during sex is the only time I feel like I'm allowed to be selfish. Yeah. And so that totally fit it, because I'm like, I don't know if this is a bad thing or a good thing, but it's the only time I'm totally selfish on what, I hope to get out of it or whatever. And it doesn't happen every time, but he would hope it happens every time. Yeah. But, so when I read this, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is okay. This is what the ultimate goal is. And so that was so validating for me. So
I'm so glad. And you remind me too of, I was talking with a man who didn't necessarily think it was really important that I wrote a book like this. And he just said, I don't know why you would need a 400-page book about sex. I mean, really all you need to know is don't be selfish. And I thought, yeah, that works great for a man. It just doesn't work great for a woman.
Yeah.
So even that just simple, flippant concept in his mind just reinforces how off we really are with sexuality.
That's so true.
That's sad.
It is sad. We're going to change that. We're changing.
Yes, we are. We are, absolutely.
Okay, so the next question I had is, I love how you explained so well that intimacy between husband and wife is ordained of God, and that it is a gift to us. He made us to experience sexual relations with the needed parts to create that enjoyment. And as men, this seems to be more natural for them. So my question is, what can we do as women to help it be more natural for us? Or will it not be? Do we need to just go through those 4 steps you just described, and we don't necessarily get that natural connection with intimacy like they do? Because for them, they don't even really have to think about it. They just can do it.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. Number 1, women don't really nurture or embrace their sexuality the way that men do. So just a very simple, almost kind of a crude concept, but men have basically been kind of touching their sexual body parts almost every day for their entire lives.
Yeah.
Women pretty much never directly touch their sexual body parts that really matter for sexuality, pretty much ever. So just the conditioning level is so different. The nurturing level is so different. The acceptance level is so different. The embracing level is so different. I mean, when's the last time you ever heard anybody say something positive about women embracing their sexuality?
Yeah.
I was speaking at a conference probably about a year ago now, and I just said, there's probably 200 people in the room, and I just said, I'd just love to have people raise their hands if they can remember the last time they heard something positive said about sexuality in any context. And I was there with probably mostly professionals, I think, at that point. No, it wasn't. Yes, professionals, but a lot of lay people too. And I had one man raise his hand. And I asked him what, and he says, I was just at a conference last week and they had somebody like you talking about sex. And I was like, okay, guys, that is not okay.
No.
That is so not okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of challenged them all to go home and some way, somehow say something to someone affirming about sexuality, especially female sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't have that. So the first chapter of my second book is called, they're all T's. There are 12 T's in the contents. But the first one is transform sexual identity. And what the research tells us is that many women have an asexual view of self. That means you see yourself as a social being, a physical being, a spiritual being, but not a sexual being. So big time.
Yeah.
That basically my good girl syndrome, and it kind of amps it up the next level, which is now we've got to embrace that sexual identity.
Okay.
And that's the solution to chapter 1 of my first book, which is the good girl syndrome.
Okay.
Because now we need to include healthy sexuality and delicious sexuality in our marriages as part of what makes us whole and alive and complete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have, let me just show you, I have a diagram in my second book, my Knowing Her Intimately book, that just, this parts of self. So there's 6 parts of self here.
Okay.
And so all of those parts of self, we generally work on fairly well.
Yeah.
But that one part, that sexual part, that's missing.
Yeah.
So you're not whole.
Yeah.
So this is not something we're just doing because our husband wants to have sex more often.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we're doing because we want to be complete.
Okay. So you would recommend then that ladies need to be proactive. They need, because I have, I've had clients that have shared, I just don't need it as much as my husband. I just don't need it. But I want to.
Don't.
Yeah.
Well, why would they? They're 4 steps away from desire. They don't even know they have desire a couple steps away.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever told them to embrace it or nurture it or desire it or like it. And those that feel like they already because there are some that do already, they don't have that same feel. And they kind of feel like they're weird.
Mm-hmm.
And they do kind of like sex.
True.
They do embrace it. So yeah, it's not surprising that women feel that way. But when I go through in the Knowing Her and They Were Not Ashamed in chapter 5, and I list all of the differences between men and women, the very first one I list in chapter 5 is actually a myth. Men have a stronger sex drive, women have a weaker sex drive. It's a myth because it's not true. We have different sex drives, as you've said. Mm-hmm. And until you know how they're different, and maybe even a little bit of in your mind why they're different, you're not going to be able to work within the new reality to make it awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of education involved in getting that. But the key basically is just, we've got to embrace it. And then we as women actually have to work on it and nurture it a little bit.
Okay. So it is us being active on our part. It's not just going to happen on its own. Yeah. We have to do like we're doing, reading the books. We've got to have a safe group that maybe we can speak openly about it, because most of the ladies in my membership group, their moms never talked to them for their honeymoon. They didn't have that experience of being able to communicate what's normal, what's not normal. And so we've got to be able to talk about it, but talk about it because I know a lot of women that talk negatively. Yeah. And that's not helping. That's not helping. So,
and Trina, maybe 2 little simple steps for your ladies could be, number 1 is get educated, which is what you're already helping them do. Number 2 is, well, actually, let me give you 3, and there's 3 E's just off the top of my head. Okay. 1 is get educated. 2 is embrace your sexuality. And 3 is develop the emotional connection in your marriage. 3 E's. Mm-hmm. Those are your simple 3 first steps. I'm going to write this down too, because
I'm writing that down. I love that. Develop emotional connection.
That's why I love doing these interviews, is I learn stuff and think of new stuff.
Like, oh, that was really good. Yes, I totally get that. Okay, so, all right. In your work that you do, how vital is it that women learn to do these steps to learn how to love, enjoy, and embrace sex in creating a healthy marriage. Because I have, in my experience, if your sex life isn't good, it affects a lot of other things. It's almost foundational. And you wouldn't think that it would be that much weighted in a marriage.
Yeah.
It really is, because it's not just about sex.
Mm-mm.
What it creates between the two of you. And I always tell women, it's so healing. It's so healing to a relationship. I mean, you think if you've had some issues and then you get a chance to be intimate together, how it's like all of a sudden like, oh, I do love him. You know, there's a healing aspect. And so how, in what you've seen with the couples you work with, how important it is that women do this work, because what could the possible outcome be if they don't?